I have prepared a talk on radioisotopes and their medical applications. Of course, I will not be covering radiotherapy, which is one of the very important medical application of radioisotopes. And I will also not cover about the sterilization of medical products using the radiation. So my focus will be on radioisotopes and their medical applications in nuclear medicine. When I mentioned to people that I work in radiopharmaceuticals and in nuclear medicine, many times people ask me questions. Some of the students ask me, my mother is having breast cancer. How do I know how severe the disease is? How to know whether the chemotherapy is effective? So questions like, my uncle is diagnosed to have prostate cancer. Is there a treatment for this? Can all cancers be treated with radiation and radioactivity? Sometimes they ask, there is a severe pain due to bone metastasis. Is there a radioactive medicine for that? These are the questions which come from people whenever we say that we start giving lectures at different places or meet and in nuclear medicine departments. Of course, there is an answer for all this in many of these questions in nuclear medicine. So before that, let us learn a bit about radioisotopes. So this learning part is not for my retired colleagues from BRC, because Godan Kuti told me that there will be students attending. So I will go to some of the very basics actually. Atomic energy starts with atom. Atom is a fundamental building block of all elements, and atom is made of nucleus, and also it has electrons which is revolving around. Atom has got protons and neutrons. Here you can say that this is the three protons, 4 neutrons, 3 electrons. So we say that this is lithium 7. This is the atom of lithium. This is the atom of lithium, and it is the atomic number is 3 and atomic weight is 7. If you look at lithium, if you keep lithium in a bottle and keep it in your house or anywhere, it will remain like that forever actually. So it is very stable. Nothing will happen unless somebody takes it and uses it. Now, this is not true with some of the atoms, some of the materials. We call it radioisotopes. You keep it for some time, it will not be there. See, for example, if you take a fluorine-18 radiopharmaceutical, keep it in the table for a few hours, you come tomorrow, that radiopharmaceutical is gone. We call these things as unstable atoms. The fluorine is unstable, or the molybdenum is unstable, and they emit radiation. In order to come to stability, they emit radiation. Now, there are different type of radiation. Suppose we assume that this is an unstable atom. We have the alpha particle emitters, we have the beta minus emitters, we have the positron emitters, and some of these will also emit the gammas. Now, in nuclear medicine, what we do is that we use this radiation for some other purpose actually. So here there is a gamma rays is coming out. We use it for an imaging technology called SPECT imaging, single photon emission computed tomography. We use an alpha particle emitting radionuclide or a radioisotope for therapy of cancer. We also use this beta minus emitters for therapy, and the beta plus, which is a positron, we use it for another technology which is called the positron emission tomography. And this is the work what we are doing at Cochin. We make radiopharmaceuticals for positron emission tomography. Now, radioisotopes per se, they are dangerous. They have to be handled with caution. They emit radiation, and this gamma radiation, if you look at it, they penetrate very heavily. And if you stand near a radioisotope which is emitting gamma radiation, it can be bad for your health. Alpha particle, you can stand nearby, but it should not go inside the body. Same is the case with the beta minus, and the beta plus, of course, you should not stand nearby, because that also emits some photons, which I will tell later. Now, why is this atom? Some atoms are stable. I said about lithium 7, it is very stable. I talked about fluorine 18, which is very unstable. This is because for every atom to be stable, there is something what is called an ideal number of neutrons needed. For example, if you talk about hydrogen, hydrogen is a single proton. There is a proton and electron. It is very stable. We have a hydrogen and water. Now, if you add one more neutron, it becomes a deuterium. Deuterium is also very stable. But as we go along with it, that means deuterium is having one proton and one neutron. Helium is having 2 protons and 2 neutrons. And as we go up, carbon is having 12 neutrons and 6 neutrons and 6 protons. And as we go up, we will find that the number of neutrons needed will be more than the number of protons. For example, when it comes to the atomic number of 70, you need anywhere between 100 neutrons. So this also brings us to another 2 concepts. What happens if there are more neutrons? If there are more neutrons, yes, it will be radioactive, it will be unstable, and it will have to decay and become stable. And what happens if there is a less number of neutrons? That will also the same thing. It will have to give out some radiation and come to the optimum stability ratio. So this is how we get the radiation out of the atoms. So here we come to 2 different type of radionuclides. One which we call it as a neutron deficient isotope. You talk about it, the fluorine 18, the fluorine atom, the stable one is actually fluorine 19. So if you remove 1 neutron out of it, it's fluorine 18. So that is radioactive, it emits beta plus particles. So we have 2 different type of radioactive isotopes. One we call it as the neutron deficient isotope, and the other one we call the neutron excess isotopes. And we use both these type of isotopes in nuclear medicine. We know about the fluorine 18, fluorine atom. Fluorine atom has got 19 protons. Now I can remove 1 neutron out of it, then it will become fluorine 18. And fluorine 18 is a radioactive isotope with a half-life of 110 minutes. Half-life of 110 minutes means it will become half in 110 minutes, another half in 110 minutes. And by maybe about 10 hours, there will be nothing left. So the fluorine 19, if you look at it, it has got one neutron more than what is needed for stability. And it decays by a half-life of 11.4 seconds. So the question is, we use both these isotopes for nuclear medicine. So we need to make these isotopes. How to make these isotopes will be the next thing what we will be looking. So in order to make neutron excess isotope, all what we need to do is add 1 neutron to it. The neutron-proton ratio will be disturbed and the resultant isotope will be radioactive. This is what we do in the nuclear reactor. Now, neutron deficient isotope, I had been talking about, let us remove 1 neutron. You cannot remove a neutron. Neutron is an uncharged particle. It is very difficult to pull out a neutron from the nucleus. So what we do is that we will add a proton to it, or we will add an alpha particle to it, or we will add a heavy atom to it, so that the number of protons will be more. So it will become neutron deficient. So the N by P ratio will be disturbed and a different element will be formed and it will be radioactive. Now, this is a nuclear reactor. I think this is the Missouri University research reactor, which is a pool type reactor. And if you want to make radioisotopes, the uranium-235 is fissioning and a lot of a copious amount of neutrons are coming out. And you can put this lutetium, anything what you want to make it radioactive, you can put into it and it will absorb the neutron and it might become radioactive. For example, lutetium-176 is one of the lanthanides. If you put in the reactor, it has got a very large cross section and we will get lutetium-177. And lutetium-177 is one of the very nice therapeutic radionuclide which has emerged in the last 20 years. And India is one of the pioneers in this field. We were one of the very early people to start working with the lutetium, and lutetium therapy is available in many of the nuclear medicine centers in India. Now, this is all possible thanks to the visionary Homi Jehangir Bhabha. In 1948, the Atomic Energy Commission was formed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, our Honorable Prime Minister. Bhabha was made the chairman of Atomic Energy, and within a matter of about 8 years, our first reactor was commissioned in Trombay, that is the Apsara reactor, on 4th August 1956. Now, if you really compare this with when was the first research reactor for peaceful application commissioned in the United States. That was in 1950. The Brookhaven National Laboratory, they had a graphite moderated reactor, essentially for the peaceful application of radioisotopes. So we were fast catching up with the rest of the world with respect to nuclear energy, with respect to with respect to production of radioisotopes, thanks to the vision of Homi Jahangir Bhabha. And unfortunately, he died in 1966. So some of us could never see him. I am sure, there are a number of people who are in my audience. They had seen Homi Bhabha. They would have heard him. Maybe they would have interacted with him. Now I will go to nuclear medicine. What is nuclear medicine? Nuclear medicine is like any other medical faculty, which uses where the diagnosis is done, where the treatment is done. So similar to that, nuclear medicine is also a medical faculty, where a radioactive preparation is used as a medicine. A radioactive preparation, we call it as a radiopharmaceutical because it is a pharmaceutical, but it is radioactive. So we use that as a medicine. And this is administered to the patient. That means the patient will be getting either an oral dose of radioactive medicine, or the dose may be injected to the patient. And nuclear medicine we use for two purposes. The first one is actually the imaging technology, the second is actually therapy. So imaging is used for diagnosis and the therapy is used for treating the patient. That means nuclear medicine offer a complete solution for certain diseases, not for all diseases, but for certain diseases, nuclear medicine offer a very complete solution. Now I will talk about the imaging. Now imagine, a patient goes to a patient is suspected to have cancer. He goes to a cancer hospital or an oncology department. He's always wondering, there are a lot of doctors sitting there. To which doctor I should go? Should I go to a surgeon, an oncosurgeon? Should I go to a chemotherapy, oncologist who will do chemotherapy? Or should I go for a radiation therapy person? So there is a dilemma. Earlier, the people used to be going to the hospital and there was no means to tell whether it is a surgical case, whether it's a chemotherapy case, or it's a palliative cases. There are occasions when many patients had been operated. The surgeon will finish the operation, will open up and say that, oh, sorry, I am not able to do much because the cancer has spread to several places. So there is no point removing anything. And in fact, this had happened to my own brother in 1986 when he was diagnosed with cancer. The operation was done in RCC Trivandrum. And the doctor said that, I cannot do anything. But today, thanks to the technology, thanks to the imaging techniques available, you don't have to open the patient. All what you need to do is that you can do either a imaging method can be done it, ultrasound, we know a computer tomography, CT, we do MRI, and also we do something called a nuclear medicine scanning. Now, if you look at this patient, this figure, this is a prostate cancer patient. The prostate is somewhere in this lower part, just near the bladder. And probably the doctor can assume that, okay, the prostate cancer is only there. But when you do an imaging in a nuclear medicine department, and when you look at the image, you don't need a physician to tell how bad the case is. Anybody can say that, anybody with a knowledge can tell that, okay, there is a lot of radioactivity accumulated here. There is radioactivity accumulated here. There is a radioactivity accumulated in the spinal cord, in the leg. So this we call it as a secondary cancer or a tertiary cancer, or nearly, okay, there is a bone metastasis is there. So the doctor, the moment the doctor sees a molecular imaging scan like this, his work is very simple. He knows whether it is a surgical case. The surgeon will tell that, look, this is not a surgical case. The chemotherapist will say that, okay, this is a chemotherapy case. I can treat this patient by using the medicines. A radiotherapy person will tell that, the cancer is spread into several places. So I cannot do much for therapy. Maybe I can do a little about giving the radiation to reduce the pain. So this is what the imaging technique what we use in nuclear medicine. Now, how about therapy? We know this, heard about this isotope called iodine-131. This was probably the second isotope which was used in nuclear medicine. In 1946, radioactive iodine was injected to given to cancer patients suffering from thyroid cancer for treatment. Our thyroid, this is the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland accumulates about 33% of the iodine what we ingest. You know, sodium iodide, sodium chloride, we take it. It is iodized salt. 33% of that, whatever that iodine is there, it will be taken up. It will be converted to hormones, and that hormones will be helping in the metabolic processes. So if you have a cancer in this particular patient, what you can do is that you can give a small amount of radioactivity, maybe about 50 microcurie of radioactivity, and we can do a scan actually. We can do an imaging, and we find that the doctor will find that, oh, there is a large amount of radioactivity taken up in this thyroid glands, in the left lobe of the thyroid glands. And probably then what he will do is that he will do a fine needle aspiration cytology, FNAC, and he will take out the session and say that, okay, there is a cancer there. Then the treatment is, you remove the cancer, you remove the thyroid completely. And after removing the thyroid, the patient will be given a large dose of iodine, something like about 30 to 200 millicurie. Some patient will need only very small. Some patient will need as high as about 200 millicurie. And once you give this 200 millicurie of radioactivity, the patient can have a full life. If you get a thyroid cancer at the age of 20 or 25, the patient can live for 80 or 100. They will not die out of thyroid cancer. Some two different types of thyroid cancers. There are more aggressive thyroid cancers also. So this is the principle of treatment, the therapy. So I spoke about how an imaging technique is used and how a therapy technique is used. So I will now go into some of the details. Nuclear medicine, the growth of nuclear medicine is thanks to one single isotope, which is called the technetium 99M. I'm sure you know many of you would have heard about technetium 99 if you would have gone on to a nuclear medicine department. This technetium 99, it is a transition element. It can form different type of complexes, and as chemists, what we do is that we make different type of complexes with the technetium, and we can image any of the organ within our body. For example, the brain can be imaged. The brain can be imaged by using on radiopharmaceutical. The heart can be seen by the radiopharmaceutical. You can have a radiopharmaceutical for the liver. You can have a radiopharmaceutical for the kidney. You can also have a radiopharmaceutical for your bone, you know. So there are at least about 20 different radiopharmaceuticals based on technetium. And this was our main business during the 70s to about 2000. Many of us were working in technetium radiopharmaceuticals, making technetium complexes, studying whether it can be used as the radiopharmaceuticals. So technetium has got a half-life of only about 6 hours. So you cannot supply a 6-hour half-life to the hospitals. So what is done is that the parent of technetium, which is called the molybdenum 99, this is supplied to the hospital. It is something like this, you know, something like a tiffin carrier, you know. This tiffin carrier contains a column, a small column, an alumina column, which will contain some amount of molybdenum 99. And all what at the nuclear medicine center, what they need to do is that you put some saline through this, and you put the vial what you need to take out the technetium will come out. So the process is so elegant and simple. It used to be called the cow, you know. It used to be called a technetium cow, and whenever you need it, you can go and milk the pertechnetate out of it. Now I will go to one typical radiopharmaceutical, which is very, very heavily used abroad in the United States and many other advanced countries, but not that heavily used in India. So let us say that there is a problem with the heart. There is the doctor is suspecting a block in the heart. There is a possibility. So what the doctor will say? The doctor will say that, you know, let us do a treadmill test. He will allow the patient to run in the treadmill for about 20-30 minutes, and not 20-30 minutes, about 10 to 12 minutes. And he will put what he will call it as a Bruce protocol. And he will monitor how is the ECG during this exercise. So from he will take out that big sheet of paper and say that there is a variation in the ECG. So you will have to be taken for an angiography, or otherwise they may suggest that you need to do an echoradiograph with an ultrasound. There again, you will get some images which will tell whether the movement of the valves are okay, whether the blood is pumping from one valve to the other, one chamber to the other chamber. But when it comes to nuclear medicine, we have a wonderful medicine for seeing how good is the heart. So here we do the same thing. We allow the patient to do the exercise. When the patient is doing the exercise, when the heart is pumping maximum, a radiopharmaceutical called MIBI, it is nothing but a technetium complex with isobutyl isonitrile. This will be injected, this will be made, and this will be injected to the patient. Maybe about 20-30 millicurie of technetium MIBI will be injected to the patient. Then we will put him in a camera. This is called actually a SPECT camera. That is called single photon emission computed tomography, and emission is missing there. A SPECT camera. This camera is actually from our own nuclear medicine center in Trivandrum. This is a SPECT CT camera. And what is the information we get out of it? We want to know how the blood is circulating within the heart. So you have the heart here. Virtually, we can do what is called a tomographic imaging. Tomography means you can cut the heart into smaller and smaller and smaller slices. You can cut into a horizontal plane, a vertical plane, and a sagittal plane you can cut. And you can find out how much radioactivity is there in each part of the heart. So this is corresponding to this apex of the heart. This is coming to the middle, and this is coming to the end of it. Now, looking at this image, a medical doctor, a nuclear medicine physician can immediately tell you whether the heart is functioning normally or not. So I have put two cardiac images, and this is the image where the person has got a very nice working heart. You find that the activity is distributed very nicely. And this is a person who has got a compromised cardiac function. So by looking at these two images, we need not be a nuclear medicine physician. We can be a person not that good in reading a nuclear medicine. But when the doctor explains to you, look, your heart has a problem. There is no blood flow in the bottom. There is not blood flow. The blood flow is not adequate compared to a normal person. So from here onwards, the cardiologist's job is very good. He need to decide what is the next thing to be done, whether it can be rectified by using the medicine, or whether they need to do an angioplasty or a bypass or whatever it is. So a lot of information is available from this technetium MIBI scan. And earlier this used to be called as a thallium scan, because this was done with a thallium isotope. And thanks to this medicine coming in the 85, MIBI coming in 85, nobody does thallium scan. But if you go to the hospital, they will do that. They will tell that, oh, let us do a thallium scan. So this is a very nice imaging technique. And in the United States, the maximum number of nuclear medicine applications are happening in the cardiac imaging. You cannot, a patient cannot go to an angiography or angioplasty before doing a technetium MIBI or a technetium tetraphosphine scan, because this is non-invasive. The moment you go to the angiography, there is an insertion of catheter, then the cost increases, and the insurance companies in the United States will not pay for that. They will say that, okay, you first do the technetium scan or the thallium scan, and based on that, the next procedure will be done. Unfortunately, in India, our cardiologists are not very happy to do this. They are more than happy to take the catheter and do an angiography. Now, I will be going to the next imaging technique, which is called the positron emission tomography. Nowadays, whenever you meet a cancer patient, Whenever you meet the relative of a cancer patient, they will tell that, my father needs or my mother needs a PET scan. So what is this PET scan? This PET scan is something which had come into prominence only in this millennium, that is post 2000, post 2000s. And this is one of the very important nuclear medicine imaging technique. And nowadays, more PET scans are done in all over the world compared to SPECT scans. Now, for doing PET, we need a radionuclide or a radioisotope which is decaying by emission of positron. So if you look at oxygen 18 is a non-radioactive isotope of oxygen, like oxygen 16 and oxygen 18 are stable. Now, if you bombard oxygen 18, or you take water, oxygen 18 enriched water, bombard it with a proton, a neutron will come out and a fluorine 18 will be formed. Fluorine 18 has got a half-life of about 110 minutes. And this is what we do every night in our medical cyclotron center at Cochin. We take some amount of water, which is oxygen 18 enriched water. We irradiate it with protons, and we will get fluorine 18. And that fluorine 18 we will convert it to different radiopharmaceuticals. Now, this is done in a machine which is called the cyclotron. Cyclotron is something like a linear accelerator. You have a proton which is coming. The energy of the proton can be increased by applying positive, negative potential, and by repeatedly applying, having different electrodes put in an array. You can accelerate the proton to several million electrons, several million MVs, sorry, several million electron volts, MeV. So one of the problem with the linear accelerator was that the length of the linear accelerator used to increase. One of the linear accelerator in California has got almost about 3.2 kilometers. So this is a young gentleman in 1930, he had an idea, can I keep this energized proton in a circular space? His idea was that the proton is coming out and you apply a magnetic field. The moment there is a magnetic field applied, the proton will bend and you can confine between a circular size. And this is the first cyclotron, the 4-inch or 5-inch cyclotron, which was prepared by this gentleman, E.O. Lawrence in 1931. He made the cyclotron, the concept of cyclotron. He also, within 6 years, they had cyclotron which was accelerating protons and other particles up to several MeVs. So we have this cyclotron. Of course, the cyclotron is not looking like this now. It is much bigger. I will show it a bit later. So what does the positron emitting radionuclide or radioisotope do? From the nucleus, the positron will be coming out. The positron will travel a few centimeter, few millimeter. Then subsequent to that, all the energy of the positron is lost and it will try to pick up on electron from the surroundings, and there is an annihilation taking place. We know conversion of energy to mass, mass to energy, what is happening in the nuclear reactor. Here energy is converted to, mass is converted to energy. There is a proton, there is an electron. These two will be annihilating, and there will be four gamma photons which will be coming in opposite directions. A 511 keV gamma photon, this is actually the rest mass of electron. So we have this positron emission tomography technique. See, think about it. We want to study what is happening in our brain, whether the brain is functioning or not. And the fuel for brain is actually glucose. If you give glucose to a patient and do a positron emission tomography, the F18 will be decaying inside the brain, and one photon will come to this side and another photon will come to this side. And by measuring these two photons, or measuring all the photons which are coming in the 360 degrees, we can reconstruct that in the form of an image. So this is the brain image on the right side. You see it, and the patient is normal. You will find that radioactivity distribution is uniform. If the patient has got a compromised brain, the radioactive distribution will not be good. So this positron emission tomography is one of the heavily used nuclear medicine technique nowadays. In Kerala, we have about 14 hospitals who has put PET-CT in the last 3 or 4 years. Now, PET-CT is more used for cancer imaging. Of course, this is also used for studying myocardial viability, the viability of the heart muscles. It is also used for brain imaging studies. But the major purpose of PET-CT, in our nuclear medicine centers, if you do about 15 PET-CTs, maybe about 14 of that will be for the cancer patients. So this is used for diagnosis. When I say to diagnosis, to a lesser extent, because generally nobody will go and do a PET-CT to see whether I have a cancer. The doctor will suspect that there is a possibility that this person is having cancer. Then they will do some marker studies. They may be doing some biopsy or FNAC and other things. Then they will say that, all right, you let us do a PET imaging. But for primary diagnosis of prostate cancer, nowadays one of the good techniques is actually PET-CT. We can do a non-invasive technique. There is no need to put the needle through the rectum to the prostate. We can do a diagnostic imaging, and if the patient is having prostate cancer, we can diagnose it by PET-CT imaging. The more important thing is actually it is used for staging of cancer patients. What is staging? When you go to the oncologist, he wants to know whether it is in the starting, whether it is a primary cancer, whether the cancer has grown into other organs, whether the cancer has gone into the bone. So there is a staging, and they put that different type of staging, that is whether it is primary, whether it is in the lymph nodes, whether it has gone to the secondary organs. So that cancer, before the treatment starts, the staging is done, the tumor board will meet and say that, okay, these patients need the attention of a chemotherapist or a surgeon or a radiation therapist. So staging, we do need actually a PET-CT imaging for staging. And then for evaluation of therapy response. Okay, somebody has got the chemotherapy. After 4 or 5 chemotherapy, the doctor wants to see whether the patient is responding to the chemotherapy what is given. So it is used for evaluation of therapy response. It is also used for recurrence of evaluation. Okay, a patient has been perfectly fine. He is treated and there is no cancer, but the physician will tell, yeah, please come back after about a year. I want to do one follow-up PET-CT. So PET-CT is one of the very non-invasive technique which is used for diagnosis, staging, evaluation of therapy response, and recurrence evaluation of cancer. Now, I don't know how many of you would have read this book, Cancer Wardile Chiri, by our famous actor and ex-parliamentarian, Innocent. At one point he writes there, when his treatment was going from one end to the other end, he said that, okay, I met the doctor. I think it was Dr. Gangadharan. I met the doctor and he told me that, okay, you go and get a PET-CT done. Probably he would have gone either to Bombay or to Bombay TMH, he would have gone, or he would have gone to Bangalore or Madras somewhere, and he would have done a PET-CT, and with the report he has come, and the doctor has seen the report and he said that, oh, now your cancer is no longer there. And how is that done? This is by PET-CT. This is, suppose you look at this image on the left side. This is a cancer patient who first enters into a cancer ward. They'll tell that, let us do one PET-CT before starting the procedure, starting our therapy. You can find that, there is a distribution of cancer everywhere. The chemotherapy is done. The patient has become clean. So this is what the telltale difference. A patient himself can say that my disease is gone, by looking at these images. Now, for doing this, we need a radiopharmaceutical. Unlike a CT, computer tomography, or a molecular MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, we need a radiopharmaceutical. And the radiopharmaceutical is a very simple compound, which we call it as glucose. Something like our sugar, the glucose molecule. And that glucose molecule, we make it radioactive by removing one of the hydroxyl group. And that hydroxyl group we replace with a fluorine 18. And this is the medicine what is used for this detection. Somebody is having cancer, you inject about 5 millicurie of fluorine 18 labeled radiopharmaceutical, allow the patient to rest for a couple of hours, and then an imaging will be done in this positron emission tomography machine. And this is a Siemens machine with a 16 slice CT, what we are having in our nuclear medicine center in Trivandrum. And we are operating this since 2015. Our first center had come in 2015 in KIMS Hospital. Now this is a standalone nuclear medicine center. Now, doing this PET-CT imaging, when you talk about it, we are dealing with cancer patients, and the cancer patient has to go to a hospital. If the hospital is not nearby, there is a lot of discomfort. A patient has to go to Bombay or Delhi or Bangalore. The patient has to go, maybe a couple of volunteers also, or a couple of relatives also has to go along with it, because these cyclotron centers are distributed at different parts. Now, I am talking about fluorine 18. The half-life is only 2 hours. That means you make the radioisotope. After 2 hours, it is half. Another 2 hours, it is half. And another 2 hours, it is 1/8. So we need to have the cyclotron nearby our facility, our center. Now, you look at where are the cyclotrons. The first cyclotron has come in Mumbai. That was at the Baba Atomic Research Center, at the Radiation Medicine Center. Now in Bombay, there are 3 cyclotrons. Now you come to the capital, there are actually 6 cyclotrons. In Delhi, in Chandigarh, another 250 kilometers, there are 2 cyclotrons. In Lucknow, there is 1. There is 1 working cyclotron and the other bigger cyclotron in Calcutta. 2 cyclotrons are there. There is 1 cyclotron in Guwahati, then 2 in Hyderabad. There are 3 in Bangalore and 1 in Chennai. So all our patients used to go to one of these places to get the PET imaging. So that was the time when Dr. Ajit Joy, he is a nuclear medicine physician who did his DRM from Bombay. His father had a problem. So when his father had a problem, he has to take him to Bangalore. His father, who was an industrialist and running a lot of pathology laboratories, the idea had come, why not set up a medical cyclotron in Kerala? So what was the best place to set up this cyclotron? The best place was actually, we thought that it is Kochi, because this is Trivandrum is halfway through and Calicut and Kannur is the other way. So I can shift the radiopharmaceutical from Cochin to Trivandrum, Cochin to Calicut, Cochin to Coimbatore and some other places. So it can be distributed like this. But it was thinking very nice actually, setting up a cyclotron in Kochi. But those who have gone through the tremor or the pain of setting up anything in Kerala, they will know how difficult it is to set up anything in Kerala. So these are our investors. This is Matthew Francis, sir. He is an engineer. Dr. Asen Kunyu and Mibu Jos Netikadan. These are the people, thankfully, these are the people who were pledging the money to set up this medical cyclotron in Cochin when I was about to retire from my Department of Atomic Energy in 2013, and we were working for this project from that time onwards. So this is the hospital. This is part of a hospital which is called the Molecular Multi-Speciality Hospital. This is nearly finishing. The construction is almost getting over. And we have the cyclotron working in this corner in the middle of this property. The cyclotron is sitting here, and we are making radiopharmaceuticals since 2018. 2018, we got our license from AERB, and now we are running the machine for the last 3 years. And this is the cyclotron what we have. This is a Siemens cyclotron. This is the shield. And because a lot of radiation will be emitted when you are making a cyclotron, running the cyclotron, and radiation will be coming out. So this will be heavily shielded. This is a moving shield. It will go and close when we are doing the operation. And this is the cyclotron, the small cyclotron, where the proton will be rotating and it will be coming out. And this is the chemistry what we do it. It's a chemistry, you can say it's a very simple to a chemist. This is a very simple chemistry. We have the glucose molecule which is protected with trifluoride protecting agents. We do an SN2 type of reaction where this group trifluoride is replaced with fluorine, and we get actually F18FDG, and this is purified. But here the problem is that we cannot do this chemistry open, because we are handling a lot of radioactivity. We handle almost about 8 curie of radioactivity in one batch. So we have to have the facility. So this is our facility, what we have it. This we call it as a good manufacturing practices compliant radiopharmaceutical laboratory. And these are the hot cells. Pankaj Jackson sir will know, we were working with the hot cells. These are the best hot cells what you ever see in the world. These are made by Von Galen companies. This is a 4-inch hot cell, so we have it. And we do all the chemistry inside this hot cell. These are the chambers. The modules, the synthetic modules like this will be kept inside it. And our people will work through the computer. They will give all the commands. The radiopharmaceutical will be made, and finally it will be coming out through, it will be dispensed here. He is dispensing the radiopharmaceutical, it will be coming out. And it will be dispatched in this lead or tungsten containers to different hospitals. So what is the impact of the medical cyclotron, what we have put in Kerala? The cyclotron is sitting at here, and before this cyclotron had come, there was only one nuclear medicine department in the whole of Kerala having cyclotron, having PET-CT. That was in Amrita Hospital. Then we put our second machine, we put the second machine in Trivandrum, thinking that, okay, we will be getting the cyclotron. One of the problem at that time was that getting the medicine was very difficult. The Bombay person will have to send the medicine. By the time the medicine comes here, most of it is gone. But with our facility coming, now there are nearly about 14 hospitals. There are 3 in Calicut, 5 hospitals, 1 in Trichur, 5 hospitals in Ernakulam doing PET-CT. We have our own center in Kottayam, the Caritas center. We have our nuclear medicine center. In the Parimala hospital, there is one. Then we have in RCC Trivandrum, we have in KIMS, and our own center is there. And we also supply our radiopharmaceuticals to Coimbatore. We also supply our radiopharmaceuticals to Mugambika in Kanyakumari district. So I will go to the last part of my talk, that is about nuclear medicine therapy, how the nuclear medicine therapy works. So we know what is cancer. Cancer is a disease which starts with a single cell. You know, human beings are made of cells. We are, in our body, we have about 36 trillion cells, and all these cells, the group of cells are doing different functions. And if the cell is having a problem, the cell is supposed to keep on dividing, and after a certain division, it is supposed to die. That is, it has to go through a procedure which is called apoptosis. The cell has to die, but this cell does not die. It will not take the signal to die. It will want to keep on dividing. This is like our extension concept in atomic energy. We don't want to retire. We want to extend, you know. So something similar to that. But so if you want to kill the cell, what we need to do is that we have to attack the DNA. We have the DNA is there. The DNA has to be broken into 2. Once the DNA is broken, and if it is broken only in single strand, it can repair it. If it is broken into 2, this is not going to be, this cell cannot repair and grow. So this is what we do in radiation therapy. You look at it, you have a cancer, it is, let us say that it's a cancer in the lungs. This we can treat it by radiation. The radiation which is coming from outside, it is impinging on the cancer. You can rotate the machine and the radiation can come out. This is what is done in a cancer hospital when you go for a LINAC, the linear accelerator therapy, or our earlier cobalt therapy. This is the principle of it. Now, I have showed you the cancer is a disease which spreads into many places. It is spreading into maybe to the lungs. It is maybe spreading into different, the liver. So when the cancer is spread, you cannot do radiation therapy, but what we can do is we can do a systemic therapy with radiopharmaceutical. We can inject a radiopharmaceuticals through the vein. And the radiopharmaceutical will go to different parts of this cancer. Wherever the cancer is there, it will go and stick to this cancer. Just like I have talked about iodine 131, it will stick to the thyroid and the remaining will be excreted. It will be very nice images. If you do an image, if you inject a radiopharmaceutical and do an imaging, we will almost get the very similar image, what I had shown earlier in the first part. So we call this as radionuclide therapy or targeted radionuclide therapy. We use the isotope called lutetium-177. As I mentioned initially, this is an isotope which is produced in the reactor. And the important part of it is it has got a very large cross section. The cross section of lutetium is 2100, which is very large. So we can make a copious amount of lutetium in our nuclear reactor. So we can use a lutetium therapy. We can also do an alpha therapy with actinium-225. Actinium is an alpha emitting isotope. It decays by emission of 4 alpha particles. That means one single actinium-225 will deposit something similar to about 27 MeV of energy. And this energy is sufficient to kill the cancer. Only thing, it has to go into the cell near the DNA. So of course, actinium-225 therapy, we do not have much actinium, but in our hospitals, we are doing this actinium-225 therapy by importing actinium. And this is a patient who is a prostate cancer patient who has got a lot of cancer all around. The bone cancer is there. He gets the 3 doses of actinium PSMA, and each of these doses, it will cost anywhere between 6 to 7 lakhs. So after 3 doses, you can see the patient has undergone another imaging and the patient is clean. And as a precaution, one more actinium PSMA is given. You can see the cancer is completely vanished in this patient. Of course, this will be this is not our image. This will be one of the best images what is circulating. But this is a telltale story. A cancer can be treated by using alpha particles. So another question which is always asked to me by our youngsters, we have recruited a lot of youngsters from our nearby colleges. We have a team of 7 people working in our medical cyclotron. Many times their parents, the students, they always ask us a question, is it safe to work with radioactivity? I always tell them, look, I joined at the age of 21 or 22 at the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. And from that time onwards, I had worked with radioactivity. And today I am alive. I have a reasonably good health. Then I also take about the example of Glenn Seaborg. Glenn Seaborg is our grand old radiochemist. He has discovered all these elements, the plutonium, americium, curium, berkelium, californium, einsteinium, fermium, mendelevium, nobelium, and also the last element what he discovered, the name was given as seaborgium. And also he is the discoverer of technetium-99m, the most important radionuclide what we use for nuclear medicine. So he had a full life. He lived 87 years, our own director, he also is living that long, having worked with radioactivity. So I will always tell that, look, radiation has to be respected. We will have to work with care. We will have to invest money to set up the best facility so that our people don't get any radiation dose. See, we are operating the cyclotron. The average radiation dose, each one of them gets maybe not more than 2 millisieverts per annum for the last 3 years. So I do have a small connection with Glenn Seaborg. I did my postdoctoral research with Dr. David Troutner at the University of Missouri. He was a student of Dr. A.C. Wall. He is a discoverer of plutonium, and he was the student of Glenn Seaborg. So I have I claim this lineage of radiochemistry coming from all the way from Glenn Seaborg to me. And I will conclude my talk by looking at what are the moral of the story, what we are getting out of this talk. The radioisotopes emits radiation which are useful for diagnosis and therapy. So the radioisotopes are useful. It is useful for mankind. Radioisotopes are produced either in the reactor or in the cyclotron. So we need the reactor and also we need the cyclotron. One is not replacing the other. A cyclotron is used for making neutron deficient isotopes. A reactor is useful for making neutron excess isotopes. And as all of you know, our Dhruva reactor is nearly 40 years old, and the next reactor is yet to come. And the Department of Atomic Energy is planning to put up a nuclear reactor, a high flux nuclear reactor with a public-private partnership. Hope it is coming in the next few years. Radioisotopes are used in nuclear medicine. Nuclear medicine is used for imaging studies. Nuclear medicine is used for therapy. And nuclear medicine is essential for the management of several diseases, and more specifically the cancer. Today, unfortunately, some of us, somebody has cancer, we will have to go to a nuclear medicine department and do get one of these diagnostic images. We have to do these images probably before starting the treatment, during the course of the treatment, or maybe afterwards. And to sum it up, radioisotopes improve the well-being of patients. It is safe to work with radiation and radioactivity. So this message I would like to emphasize and re-emphasize, because Kerala is a very special place. We are operating a cyclotron and we operate it very safely. We do not discharge any activity to the environment. We collect all the radioactive gases and allow it to decay for about 18 hours, and after that only it will be discharged. So this is next week is National Science Week. 28th February is the National Science Day, and I wish all the youngsters a happy Science Week. This is our the only Indian Nobel laureate in science, Dr. C.V. Raman, along with K.S. Krishnan, who is the co-discoverer of Raman effect, for which Raman has, Sir C.V. Raman got the Nobel Prize. So I wish all my youngsters a very happy Science Week, and thank you very much. I put this to the youngsters. Curiosity, talent, and practice are the three important attributes what is needed to succeed. This small child is having curiosity to learn everything new in the world. Shobana is an actress having a lot of talents, but she had been practicing for the last 30 years dance to have this beautiful, very elegant, graceful pose. Thank you. Thank you very much.